right, are a big part of the reason that we have impaired streams in Pennsylvania. It's not just pollutants and erosion from out on the landscape, but erosion from the actual banks of the stream itself is a major contributor to the amount of sediment that flows in our waterways and fills and chokes the bottoms of our streams. And the reason that our streams are eroding now in an unnatural way is kind of manyfold. Part of it is what Beth was talking about before, that we have a lot more impervious service than we ever did before. So we have higher volumes of water flowing in our streams at really high rates when we have storm events. All the water moves in really fast and it leaves really fast. It's very powerful. And the power of water is what causes a lot of the erosion. The other issue that is a big contributor in Pennsylvania is that we have a very big mill history here in Pennsylvania, right? We had a lot of mills before we had suburban neighborhoods, and the mills were powered by water wheels, and they had to create impoundments and dam up little ponds to divert the water so that it would go into raceways and get those wheels spinning. And dams are actually really effective, right? They're settling ponds, great way to catch sediment in the water. Even small amounts of natural sediment get caught up behind dam walls. But over time, those ponds would fill in, and they're filled with pretty soft soils. We don't have mills around here anymore. We have the history of them. We have roads and buildings and wedding halls named after them. But a lot of those dams have been breached, the ponds were drained, and what was left behind was just the trickle of water cutting through those soft soils, and we built on them. We built on these soft soils, we planted grass over them, and treated them like aged, long-term standing soils, and they just aren't. They're younger, they're softer, and they erode really fast. And so those streams are moving through soils that just are not holding themselves together. And so there's a number of things that we can do to try to stabilize those situations. Some are very expensive and require professional engineering. Folks that come in, dig away at the streams, make them wider and shallower, and take those soils away in the backs of trucks to somewhere else. And that is basically what we call reconnecting a stream to its floodplain, right? Allowing the water to spill out gently instead of getting caught in those deep channels. It requires a lot of space, right? Can you imagine digging this stream back down to a shallow level? We'd have to give up half the elementary school probably to get this stream out as wide as it's supposed to be, and I don't think Kate would be living here anymore either, right? So not every stream is a candidate for that kind of work. But we want to do something to try to start stabilizing those soils more and keep them from falling in the streams, dumping in the streams, and being an issue. You're losing property every time your lawn falls in the stream. It's getting deeper, and when it hits bedrock, then it starts to cut out wider, but not in the good way, right? It's undercutting itself. It can start to threaten infrastructure. So a way we can get roots growing fast right in the banks of the stream and help try to stabilize is live staking. We're using the natural science of how plants grow to just cut branches off of trees and shove them in the banks. Remember, we said if you want to actually move earth, shovel the soil inside of a stream, you need a permit. No shovels required here. We're just jamming sticks in dirt. It's hilarious, but it works. And it works because plants have a lot of cells that haven't really decided what they want to be yet, like me. Like people. So we hear about stem cells in the news because they often come with a lot of controversy, because when we are young and developing in the womb, we're made up almost entirely of stem cells, and so people get the idea that stem cells only come from a developing fetus, but they don't. There's all kinds of stem cells, right? You have them in your body, right? If you get a wound, your skin grows back because there are cells that can become skin and patch that up. Now they probably will not become a new heart or a new liver for you, but they are still a type of stem cell. And plants are the same way, right? Every node on a plant, like where a branch comes out, or where a petiole for a leaf comes out, or a flower stem, or where roots are emerging, is emerging from an area of the plant that we call meristem, right? It's stem cells in a plant. And with plants, they're a lot less determined. They can shift their fate depending on what kind of hormone signals they're getting, and depending on what kinds of environmental signals they're getting. They change course, right? So how many of you have bought basil in the grocery store, kept it in a glass in your window, and it starts growing roots in that glass, right? Didn't have roots when you brought it home, but it's got roots now. Stem cells doing the same work that these branches are going to do in the stream. Not every plant is great for this. We are using branches from trees that like it wet and that grow pretty quickly. Because if you have a slow growing species and they don't really like wet soils, they're probably going to dry out and die before they get around to changing their minds about what part of the plant they are. But we're effectively going to cut sticks from trees until they look like this. And that's it. And this is going to become a tree, hopefully. 75% of these will become trees. That's about the success rate we usually have with these if they're planted right. So we're taking advantage of the nodes. We're taking advantage of stored energy. So this time of year is ideal, right? Things are going into their dormant period. They've already started dropping their leaves. They're not busy growing anymore. So they've been saving up the last bit of energy from photosynthesis, packing it away and hanging on to it until spring comes. So now, and then again at the end of March, maybe in the beginning of April, though it gets warm down in this part of the state fast, while that energy is still being stored, are really good times for live stakes. You could potentially do it any time of year. You just won't have as good survival rate, right? Because you're gonna have a lot of energy that maybe has already been spent on that starting to grow period, or hasn't been built up yet because the leaf out has only just happened. But what I would like you to get the experience of trying today is both pruning and harvesting a live stake, and then also learning how to plant one properly. So the first thing I'm going to do is demonstrate pruning, and I brought a bunch of unpruned limbs with me so that everybody can try cutting a live stake or two off of one of these. And then I was going to ask Kathleen and her crew to demonstrate how we plant them. And we'll just use the end of the berm here instead of climbing down in the stream, since it's a little slippery today, because the berm is another great spot to do this. And you can see those are nice, wet, moist soils. They're pretty happy, and I think they're gonna take live stakes really well. So in that bucket that the mallets were in, there are more pruners. If you don't have your own pair with you today, there's a lot of different schools of thought on harvesting live stakes and the lengths and the sizes. But my rule of thumb is, unless you want to carry a lot of extra equipment out in the field, you cut live stakes that are the thickness that your pruners can handle. And so usually that's somewhere between pinky and thumb width. Once you get skinnier than pinky width, we actually call those whips. And I have a couple in here. They're still useful, but they're not going to do as much work as fast. I kind of use them to fill in holes. I have been told, especially with willow species, that you can run branches through a wood chipper and leave the pile sitting outside, and willow trees will grow out of the wood chip pile, right? Because there's nodes in there and they don't care and they're crazy. So even the whips are effective in some ways. But I'm looking at this right now and I'm saying I could probably get 3 live stakes out of this, maybe a whip or 2. This is elderberry. Elderberry makes a great live stake species. It likes it wet. You can make wine out of it if you're interested in the multiple services that it provides. I know someone who does things like that.
Makes a great liqueur.
Makes a great liqueur, yes, a cordial of sorts. And jam. And it's very trendy right now for immunity, so you could sell it on the side of the road for all I know. Do what you want. Elderberry is more of a cane growing species, a little different than the rest of the shrubs we're talking about. So a little closer to the growth pattern of like blackberries and raspberries and things like that. And so it's a little soft and it has like a big wide open pith. So it's a little easier to crush, but it's still really great for this kind of propagation or planting. And the other species we have in here, I'll just kind of lay these down. So that's elderberry. These are dogwoods, the red twig dogwoods. There's lots of different kinds of dogwoods in the world. Not all of them are suited for live staking, but the red stems, and then there are like yellow stem varietals and things out there as well. There's a couple different species that fall into the families, but they're generally silky and red osier dogwoods. And the only way to truly tell the difference this time of year is by the color of the pith, that little center spot in the center. I wouldn't stress about it. But they make great live stake species. This is buttonbush. We planted buttonbush today. No, this is another elderberry piece. This is buttonbush. They're a little similar because they've got the little dot kind of lenticels on the outside, but I know this one's buttonbush
Right, yeah.
for a reason. Yee, yeah, right. So buttonbush work really great as well. I thought I had, you know what? This is elderberry. The one I was holding in my hand that whole time is willow. This is a willow. This is a pussy willow species, so it's not a big willow tree, but small, shrubby, growing kind of willow. Oh. Hello, Nicole. Thanks for coming. So all of these work really well. All the willow species work great. But if you don't want big willow trees in your yard, especially black willows because they drop limbs really rapidly, I only use those in big open areas, more rural settings.
Kathleen's going to demonstrate how we bang this into the ground. Yeah. So one thing we want to look at is which way the water is flowing in the stream where we're putting the live stake, because that's going to make a difference about how you plant the live stake. So you want to plant in the direction of the flow of the water, right? Mm-hmm. So what would happen if we put it the other direction and the water started flowing down?
Go.
Resistance.
Go west.
Say that nice and loud, Joe.
Yanking it out, right? So if the water's flowing along this in the same direction, it's less likely to yank it out of the ground.
And all the debris that comes with it.
And all the debris that comes with it, that's right. So Kathleen's going to put a pilot hole in the ground here. Yes. And she's going to try to make it as deep as possible, because we're going to put as much of this in the ground as we can. And why would we want to do that?
More nodes getting activated.
More nodes being activated. Very good, Michael. Hang it in. More roots. And why do we want more roots?
Better soil control.
That's right. It holds the bank together. So, well, let's take a look at how long it is. Sometimes it's hard to get it in as deep as you want it, because there are stones or rocks or whatever. You might have to try again a few times or whatever.
This was a dream. I have not been able.
So we're going to put that in as far as we can, and then give it a little tap with the mallet too. Sometimes they just aren't going to go in as far as we want. That's life, right? But we're going to try the best we can to get them in as far as we can. And then you can tap that with the mallet. And that's another reason to have the top flat, because it's easier to tap it in with the mallet. That's pretty good. Look at that. Look at that. Very nicely done. Now, the next hole you want to make, you want to think about a triangle pattern for your stakes. Okay, so typically something like up here, down here. You've got a triangle. So you're going to put 3 kind of close together, and then just keep repeating that pattern along the bank. And it doesn't really matter how close together they are necessarily. You're just looking for those roots to grab that soil and hang in there and do its job.
And they will not all survive.
They will not all survive, especially at this time of year. There's a lot less chance of them surviving than there is if you do this in the spring, right after that plant has stored up all that energy for the winter and is ready to, go crazy in the springtime.
I'll tell you though, we don't get that much loss. I've been practicing more and more with winter plantings. And I will admit,
that I had leftover live steaks from an event last fall, and I used them as part of my winter decor. And I jammed them into my planters with like cut branches from pine trees. And in the spring, when those finally thawed out, they had been frozen most of the winter, I pulled them out and I planted them and they survived.
Nice.
So.
Very nice. So they want to grow.
Yeah.
Right?
Was it red twig dog?
Yes. And they looked beautiful in my little winter planters.
Trying to make it stop growing.
Yeah, good luck.
You would have to ask the homeowner about that.
What's that?
There's a lot more of
This
it.
English ivy.
Kathleen
I
wants
get
to pull
bothered.
the
Like if I
English
see
ivy.
multiflora rose or something on a
Yeah,
big,
I got everything
I
here.
pull it.
Well, we'll focus on planting and you can pull
Okay.
later.
Yeah,
So.
like multiflora rose.
And one of the reasons that we don't really care that not all of them will survive is the benefit of this is it's very low cost and low effort. So whatever you get out of it is tremendous compared to what you put in.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's
That
fun.
ratio called?
Return on investment.
What?
ROI, return on investment.
Yeah, I guess so, right? Golden ratio.
So, if you don't use a hammer, if you got soft enough soils, I did bring along so a piece of rebar without a handle on it, just so you can see what you're looking for in the store. And our friends from North Carolina came up and showed us how they do workshops like this too. We always like to share. So it's hard to get them out of the ground without a handle. If you have pounded them in really far with a mallet, you're gonna have a lot of vacuum, and the handle really helps you get it out. But if you're not going in quite as far with the pilot drill, but your hand is tired of pushing this thing in and out, they cut holes in tennis balls and use them as a tool to push on. It just saves your hand a little bit.
Still helps to use a glove.
Yes, it does still help to use the gloves. So now you have a full
Leather.
I have to say, even with the welded rebar handle, we've been in places in Washington Crossing where we broke that off.
Oh yeah, my
Putting
handle
your
came
feet on the
off.
bench
Yeah,
trying
mine
to pull
too.
it back out again.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, the soil is so rocky.
if everybody wants to give this a shot, I think we've got, I don't know how many tools we have.
There's a bucket full of rebar, some with
Okay.
handles, some without, and then the other thing that Kathleen has there is it's got a soil probe. It is meant for like looking for infrastructure underground. They sell these up to
Very
like
nice point on it.
yeah, they come up as big as like 48 inches long. Folks use these to find like pipes before they dig sometimes, but they also make great live stake pokers. You can find them online. So.